I am live. A lot to remember. I'm on chapter 13 now. This is a travel account by Joan Marshall Grant. She travels a lot in that area in France. She dedicated this to Denys and Charles, her husbands. She passed away in 1989. This was published in 1962. And here we are at chapter 13 on priests and plumbing. Although in the lot the conflict between Catholic and Huguenot did not result in such wholesale massacres as were inspired by Catherine de' Medici in more northerly parts of France, differences in dogma provided an excuse for sanguinary feuds comparable to more violent phases of Scottish clan warfare. But in the case of Montal and Assier, during the later part of the 15th century, although Jehan de Balzac, Dame de Montal, was a staunch Catholic, and Jean de Glaubt de Gonoillac, Dame d'Assier, so passionate a convert to the Huguenot cause that Calvin frequently accepted her hospitality. The two women preferred to ignore each other rather than risk destruction of their properties. The Château d'Assier is 30 kilometers from Saint-Céré by the D48 through Lem to La Capelle Marival, then south on the N140, the main Saint-Céré-Figeac road, and west on N653. It was built by the Dame d'Assier's father, Jacques de Galliot de Genoillac, with part of the fortune he accumulated while Grand Armorier and Minister of Finance to François Ier. Only the west wing now remains, but a print in the Bibliothèque Nationale shows that in 1680 it was as richly decorated as, and even larger than, Montal. The church he built at Assier is still intact, and contains his splendid flamboyant tomb, surmounted by his statue, leaning on a gun barrel with his foot on a cannonball. For Galliot de Genoillac was the militarist who completely revolutionized battle tactics by employing artillery. The outside of the church is surrounded by a frieze in high relief, a strip cartoon describing one of his campaigns in which cannon reduce castles which also bristle with cannon, perhaps to point the morale that, as massive walls were now useless for defense against the new weapon, everyone had better follow his example and build houses of elegance that were comfortable to live in. When Charles and I first went to Assier, we returned to Saint-Céré by the N140, because we wanted to stop on the way to visit the Château d'Aynac. It is a curious structure, for the central donjon is 6 stories high, and each corner there is a round tower with a roof shaped like a sugar sifter, which increases the resemblance to a gigantic queer. It had recently been acquired by the state as a holiday home for disabled seamen, but I had been told that 3 of the rooms had chimney pieces and ceilings classified as national monuments, which therefore had to be shown to visitors on request. However, we did not see them, although the chateau was empty except for a caretaker. She was in an exceedingly bad temper, as we discovered when she leaned out of an upper window to brandish a broom at us. "The sailors arrive tomorrow, and I am busy, so go away," she shouted. We tried to mollify her, and when this failed, we left, considerably disgruntled. We should probably never have gone to Aynac again, unless a timely cloudburst had driven us into the hotel. "So, you have been turned away from the chateau," said Madame de Patron indignantly as she poured wine for us in the bar, which is also the dining room and the kitchen. That monster of a woman is not, as of course you understand, of Ainak. She was inflicted on us by the new owners. She comes from Paris. Knowing that to come from Paris was sometimes to the Lutois seem as opprobrious as to come from the Black North to the Scottish Irish, to the Southern Irish. We made appropriately sympathetic noises. How different it was when the real family lived there, she said, picking up a glass and polishing it vigorously. But the last of them died. Such a kind, generous lady she was, too. At the clinic of Figueirac during the war, she sighed. Poor lady. She never really recovered after her daughter was shot. Shot by the Germans? No, not by the Germans, she said, after an uneasy pause. And to prevent further questions, she bustled over to the stove and pretended that the soup required her full attention. It was excellent soup, which in the lot is unusual, and a prelude to so good a dinner that we went back there several times for a meal, including wine for the two of us never cost more than 20 shillings. It was not that evening, not from her, that we heard about the tragedy at the chateau, but while gossiping with some of her regulars. It was explained to us that there would have been no tragedy if the repairs to the electric light machine at the chateau had not been entrusted to a foreign firm. Foreign meaning that the firm came neither from Saint-Céré nor Figeac. The electrician fell in love with the daughter of Madame la Marquise, a young lady very bien élevée, who of a certainty had given him no encouragement. In fact, the only time she was overheard to speak to him was to tell him not to be impertinent. But the electrician had a revolver. Opinion was divided as to whether he had acquired it while working with the resistance or purchased it later on the black market. One day he waylaid the girl and declared his passion. He was repulsed and fired 5 bullets into her. The assassin would have been lynched, so we were vehemently assured, had he not cheated the village out of its vengeance by killing himself with a 6th bullet. As though this were not tragedy enough, the curé then disgraced himself by falling in love with a bereaved mother, and was so ashamed of doing so he hanged himself from a tree in our park. But he could not even hang himself properly, and was cut down just in time to save his life, though his face was purple as an overripe fig and his eyes bulged like a bullfrog's. We were asked to imagine the idiocy of such an act, especially as no word of love had passed his lips, and no one would have guessed his feelings unless he had bleated his impious thoughts while his rescuers were helping him to get his breath back. At this juncture everyone joined in with indignant memories of the curé. Their major grievance seemed to be that listening to their confessions had not given him a more robust attitude towards sin, and that a priest who could not keep his own thoughts to himself was an unreliable repository of other people's secrets. Hello, and I stop this here and finish this another time on Priests and Plumbing.